Stats in a Wrap, the podcast series from Eurostat.
Os jovens têm que pagar renda.
Ja, især fordi der er en forventning om, hvorfor...
Deben trabajar y estudiar al mismo tiempo.
Que o mercado precisa.
Competence via l'intelligence artificielle.
Waardoor mensen ook heel lang thuis blijven zitten.
Hello and welcome to Stats in a Wrap, the podcast from Eurostat, the statistical office of the European Union. I'm Jonathan Elliot, your host for this episode, and I invite you to join me on an adventure into the numbers, the data, and all the points on the map that tell the stories of the 27 member states and their 450 million inhabitants in all their dazzling diversity. And no, we won't be talking about medians, means or modes, because this podcast is all about you and me, and the statisticians who love the art and science of turning the raw numbers into a magic lens, an X-ray machine, to see the European Union as it really is. So come on in to our Wrap Cafe where the data is delicious, and let's get started. Do you remember your first job? And if your first job awaits you, does that fill you with hope or dread? Unless you're retired or rich, it's hard to get away from the world of work, and when you're starting out, it can be a daunting process. So today, we're going to go behind the statistics to understand how Europe measures youth labour market participation, and what the data actually tell us, and crucially what challenges statisticians face in painting an accurate picture. Because if we can't measure it properly, we can't really understand it, and we certainly can't design good policy to support young people through this critical phase of their lives. Well, fortunately, we have two experts very well placed to help navigate this complex landscape. They are Riccardo Gatto at Eurostat, and he's the leader of the Labour Force Survey Methodology team there. Riccardo, welcome.
Hello everyone. I'm very happy to be here with such a good team speaking about this important issue.
Lovely to have you here. And next to Riccardo in the cafe is Frances van der Mooren, who is a researcher at Statistics Netherlands, and she specialises in the experiences of young people and their transition from education to the labour market. Frances, welcome.
Thank you very much. Very nice to be here.
Lovely to have you here. Well, it's great to have you both on the show, but before we get stuck into the subject matter, I have to ask you a question about your own transition into the labour market. What was your very first job? And I define by a job, well, you can choose whatever you like. I'm going to choose the job that paid me some rent money and food money, rather than the first job I did delivering newspapers on a Saturday. While you're thinking about this, I asked Matthias, our producer, what his very first job was. It wasn't being a nightclub bouncer, because I thought that he would say that, but he was actually working in a garden as a labouring gardener. I think I've got that right, Matthias. Matthias is sort of smiling and nodding yes. My first job was working as an assistant film editor in a tiny dark film editing suite with no ventilation, where my boss did not allow me to sit down at all, and he chain smoked all day, every day. I had to do this job for 6 weeks. Riccardo, what was your first job?
I took it very easy. I was playing around in the university a lot, doing researches, getting small money, until one day I just won a competition and I entered in the National Institute of Statistics. Maybe that's the moment, but I arrived there rather late, but very happy.
Wow, what a great introduction to your career. Sounds like a great start. Frances, what was your first job?
Yeah, a completely different one. I started when I was 17 at, how do you say it, a grocery store on wheels. And I had to sell yogurt and bread and all that kind of things. But it was also a very happy period in my life. So as an introduction to the labour market, it was a very positive one.
It does sound rather positive. I thought I'd had a tough start, but Dubravka, our commissioning editor at Eurostat, beats us all when it comes to first job horror stories. For her first job, she had to translate a book about animal slaughtering techniques, even though she was a vegetarian. I think that probably sounds more like, psychological torture than work. Well, we're all very lucky we didn't have to do anything like that. Let's dive into the subject matter. Riccardo, tell us a little bit about why the transition from education to employment is such a pivotal yet misunderstood phase in young people's lives.
Well, and it is going to be more and more difficult and more misunderstood. You know, the labor market changed a lot recently. Digitalization, needs for new technical skills, and even new relational skills emerged recently. The problem in understanding the new way to work maybe is linked to the fact that the educational system and the society are maybe walking a few steps behind. The situation has been really clearly evident after the pandemic that changed completely the rules of the labor market. Maybe not everyone understood how this has been a turning point, even among employers. Remote work, new tools, completely changed not only the jobs, but also the relational rules and the organizational working models. And now we are in a transition phase in which maybe traditional organization model and the new one are coexisting, creating a lot of difficulties.
There's a lot of pressure, isn't there, Francis, on young people to not only understand and navigate the world of work, but then to get their careers moving smoothly. And if it doesn't go well, it can have a really long-term impact, can't it? Can you just tell us a bit about what you found in your research?
Yes, I think there's a lot of pressure and high expectations from themselves, of course, but also people around them. And you have to make the right decision. And people start in a certain education and then it becomes more and more difficult. They are doubting what to do. There's a lot of pressure to choose the right education and to be successful in the labor market instead of trying and developing in a more natural way.
Let's step out of the Rap Cafe for a moment and talk to some people on the streets of Berlin to get their views on the sometimes precarious journey from education to employment.
I believe the jobs that are secure at the moment are trades such as electrician, joiner, plumber, mechanic.
And your friends go to university and then everyone goes to university. But I think it's actually maybe starting to change now. Because I've had some friends which went to university and are now learning the more trade kind of jobs. Like one that was, as me, a software engineer and is now learning how to be an electrician. Stuff like that. So maybe it is starting to change again to be more balanced.
Riccardo, the variety of work styles and job types is far greater than it used to be, and young people are often treated as dispensable, with little say or power in the terms of their employment. They have to settle very often for insecure or poorly paid work, and it can be a very unsettling and precarious picture quite often, can't it?
This is particularly true now after the pandemic. There are different kinds of precariousness, there are different kinds of uncertainty, temporary jobs, even very short duration of working path. This may be a trap. It may be a resource. It may be a good way to learn and to progress, but it may be a trap that closes you in such kind of low quality jobs. How to exit from this is very, very, very complex issue. The reality is that the labor market now is changed for everyone, but in particular for those who are entering now in the market. Digitalization is breaking the borders. Now, people from all over the world can work in our own labor market, sitting at their desk somewhere in the world, in their own countries. This is competition increased in our own labor market. This competition most probably will kill low-skilled jobs in our countries. And I think that youth, to exit from this trapping situation, needs to develop new and higher skills to be successful.
Francis, how typical is the picture in the Netherlands? Do young people leave education and find work that suits them quite easily? And are they prepared for work when they start new jobs?
Yeah, in the Netherlands, it's very common to work at a young age, and a lot of young ones already have work experience before graduating. However, it's not always that easy to find a job that suits you, because a side job is something completely different than a full-time job and a job that you need to earn money. They have a lot of work experience, but that's not a guarantee to have an easy part as a starter in the labor market. I think it's also the depends if you're in a work-based program or another one. The transition is more easy.
It should be said that the young people of the Netherlands lead Europe in their appetite for the labour market. Let's step out of the cafe again and hear from the people in the streets of Berlin about what life's like for young people searching for work.
I mean, to be honest, I don't think that any branch is completely safe for the next 20 years. I think we live in very unstable times, both economically and politically. For young people, we should try and learn as much as we can in as many fields possible to try and adapt to a changing market.
Definitions of youth are changing as well, of course, and have been for a long time. Riccardo, there was a time, a long time ago, of course, before the 1960s, I expect, when you were young and then you were in work and more or less an adult. And that was it. Work almost made men and women out of boys and girls. But that era has well and truly gone, hasn't it?
No, it's not like this anymore, unfortunately. Again, once things were very clear, and I would say from the sociological point of view, before the 60s of the last century, youth simply didn't exist. There were not such a category. There were no focus on their needs. They were just considered as not yet adults. Then in the 60s, with all the cultural revolution that took place during that years, youth started existing as a category with their own needs, their own expectations. It was somehow a definition. So when they started the working career and having child, they were arriving all at the same age. At that time, they became adults, so it was easy to distinguish between the two ages of the life. Now it's not anymore like this. It's fuzzy. The definition of youth is changing, and we see that statistical definition is increasing. Every year we enlarge the youth group going ahead with the age. Now we are at 29. A few years ago it was 18, then 25, now 29. Why? Because boundaries are not anymore precise. You start your working life later. You start your making your own family later, in a very different moment in your age, according to different countries.
Francis, you've argued very persuasively that becoming a worker is best done gradually, regardless of the age of the person embarking on that journey.
Yes, that's right. I think it's no doubt that you learn a lot during education, but you don't learn the skills you really need in a working environment. It's important to acquire those skills by learning by doing, and also use and learn from your colleagues with more experience in that working environment.
Getting into the culture of work as well as the hard practicalities of the skills and so on.
Yes, skills and also just learn from older people, older employees who has the experience already.
Yeah, mentoring and apprenticeships, the intergenerational induction of young people into work is, it seems, piecemeal and optional so much of the time. Let's go for a stroll and hear more from our public on the streets about balancing the world of education and work.
To study in Scotland, for many young people, you have to work. There is not enough in terms of support from parents and support from the government, funding, etc. You have to work to get by. I think it puts an enormous strain on them in terms of getting the full benefit of their education. They turn up late for lectures, they're tired. It's a shame. It's not always a good thing.
Now we're going to go to a question that's been sent in by one of our Instagram users. This is about the impact of AI on jobs for new graduates. Riccardo, you're interested in this area. The conventional view has always been that, well, education is always good for employment prospects. But what does AI tell us? How does that impact the knowledge economy and its workers, who are often people with degrees?
There is a lot of international work on how to find out the relationship between presence of AI and the impact on the actual jobs. there are a lot of youth that are following education course, very focused, very specialized, in order to be, they hope to be more spendable on the labor market because they have such a detailed skill. This may be good, but maybe also fragile because then an innovation comes and your skills are not useful anymore. So I would recommend not to specialize too much during the education period, because it's important to remain flexible, to be able to react fast at any innovation change that happens more and more often.
Francis, do you think it's helpful to divide education or the approaches of education either into an emphasis on vocational specialisms or alternatively a plan to get young people ready to be adaptable?
I think it also depends per field, educational field, because in one field the education is leading to a specific profession and in the other one it's more general. So I think it's depending on the field you're in. What Riccardo says, I think it's underlining the work-based learning. So go to the labor market and learn by doing I think that's what Riccardo said. The education is following the labor market. It's always a little bit later and behind.
Let's step out of the cafe for a moment to hear the word on the street.
So I think that in order to get a job, a formal job, I think that they should try part jobs, small jobs, so they get the chance to get in.
Francis, how do you see the future for young people in the labour market, and what should be the priorities for educators preparing them for the world of work?
I think we have to look at the transition from education to the labor market and not to underestimate the worth of vocational education. We need a lot of people on the labor market with the vocational education. Also realize that our world is changing and there are other skills necessary. What we need in the transition from education to training, we have to pay a lot of attention and appreciate the more vocational educated as the ones in the universities for applied sciences.
Riccardo, how would you answer the question that what's the biggest challenge facing young people, and then what gives you optimism?
The biggest challenge now is the uncertainty, because even once you are in the labor market with all this kind of new form of works that are substantially lower quality or at least have a shorter horizon, there is a lot of uncertainty. And on top of this, we have seen the impact that innovation that comes randomly can have on our labor outcome. So my indication is mainly exactly the same as Francis. But I think it's important what you said. Yes, choose a sector, follow your vocation, but keep also wide open your mind, learn a lot from a wider range of information of education, because you may be asked to change everything. So the wider your mind is, the more adaptable you will be when any innovation will come or when you will face any difficulty.
It only remains for me to say thank you very much to our guests today, who gave us fantastic insights into the extraordinary challenges facing young people as they move from education into employment, and what the data tells us about that strange and weird and wonderful journey. Riccardo, Gatto from Eurostat, thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, and thank you very much, Francis. It was really interesting.
And Francis van der Mooren from Statistics Netherlands, thank you so much for giving us your insights today.
Thank you very much also, and for the nice conversation and all the things I learned myself also.
It was wonderful. Thank you very much, everybody. If you've enjoyed Stats in a Wrap, don't forget to follow us on the streaming platforms where the show can be found on Spotify, Apple and YouTube, and share our adventures with friends and colleagues. And if you'd like to know more about the topics covered in this podcast and practically every aspect of statistics in the EU, you should make your way to Eurostat's amazing educational resource, Statistics Explained. It's really worth checking out. And of course, come to the Wrap Cafe for the next edition, in which we'll be showing the critical importance of precise definitions in statistics through the lens of transport. Our restless world moves people and goods constantly by train, plane, automobile, tram, gondola, horseback and hot air balloon, not to mention container ships, e-bikes and driverless taxis. Getting the stats right to compare all those across 27 countries and beyond is a wonderfully complex journey into the heart of official statistics. So buckle up, it's going to be quite a ride. Join us then, but for now, goodbye.